I was standing in a private dining room I had paid $9,000 for, holding a plate my own mother had just told me to put down, because, in her words, "The hosts don't serve, Margaret. Sit down and let your sister handle it." My sister hadn't paid for a single candle in that room. I had. And in the next 90 seconds, without raising my voice once, I made sure every single person at that table knew exactly whose money had bought their dinner. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, the channel where quiet women stop apologizing and start setting the record straight. If you've ever poured yourself into a family event only to watch someone else take a bow for it, you are going to feel this one in your chest. Hit subscribe, tap that like button, and settle in, because Margaret's family is about to learn that silence isn't the same thing as surrender. My name is Margaret Whitfield. I'm 35 years old. I run a small accounting practice out of a converted office above a bakery in Wilmington. And until 8 months ago, I would have told you my family loved me. Not the loudest kind of love. Not the kind that shows up in group chats with heart emojis. But love, I thought, all the same. The quiet, dependable kind, where you're the one everyone calls when something needs to get done. That should have been my first clue. Love doesn't usually come with a task list. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March, right as I was locking up the office. My mother, Diane, has a particular tone she uses when she wants something. Warm on the surface, with an undertow that pulls you along before you've agreed to anything. "Margaret, honey," she said, "your father and I have been talking. 40 years is 40 years. We want to do it properly this time. A real party, not like your cousin's backyard thing." A pause, precisely timed. "You're so good at this sort of thing. You'll take care of it, won't you?" I remember standing on the sidewalk with my keys still in the lock, watching my breath fog in the cold, and saying yes before I'd even asked what taking care of it meant. That was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. My older sister Vanessa was the one who got asked how she felt about things. I was the one who got asked to fix things. I didn't clock in that moment that my mother hadn't called Vanessa first. She'd called me because she already knew what the answer from me would be, and she wasn't sure what it would be from her. Over the next 6 weeks, taking care of it turned into something closer to a second job. I found the venue, a restaurant downtown with a private back room that had exposed brick and string lighting, the kind of place that looks effortlessly elegant in photographs and costs exactly as much as you'd expect. I paid the deposit myself, $1,200, because my parents were, as my mother put it, between things right now, a phrase she'd been using for the better part of a decade to describe a financial situation that never seemed to resolve itself. I built the guest list from scratch, cross-referencing my mother's half-remembered address book with old holiday card lists, tracking down email addresses for cousins she hadn't spoken to since a wedding a decade ago. I hired the photographer, a soft-spoken woman named Priya, who did beautiful, unposed candids. After scrolling through 11 portfolios on my lunch breaks, comparing pricing in a spreadsheet I titled, half-joking to myself, Operation 40 Years, I ordered the flowers, white ranunculus and eucalyptus, because my mother had mentioned once, years ago, in passing, that they were her favorite, and I had filed that detail away the way I file away most things, quietly, for later use. The way you save a receipt you don't yet know you'll need. I designed the little gold place cards myself, staying up until midnight 3 nights in a row getting the calligraphy right, because I wanted it to look like it had been done by a professional, not by her daughter squinting at a laptop with a stylus and 3 tabs of font tutorials open. I taste-tested the menu with the chef, adjusting the salmon order after my Uncle Ray's allergy came up in a group text, coordinating a separate vegetarian plate for my cousin's new girlfriend without anyone having to ask twice. I picked the playlist. I picked the lighting cues with the venue's events coordinator. I even picked out my mother's corsage. A small detail nobody requested and nobody I suspected would notice. But I wanted the night to feel finished in a way that only comes from someone caring about the parts nobody sees. The total came to just under $9,000. I want to be clear about something. I didn't resent paying for it. I had the means, my parents didn't, and I loved them. That part was never in question. What I resented, what I only let myself fully feel much later, turning it over in my head during a drive home one night with the radio off, was something quieter and harder to name. It was the fact that not once, in 6 weeks of planning, did anyone ask me how I was doing, whether the late nights were wearing on me, whether I needed help, or even just a check-in text that wasn't a follow-up question about seating charts. I had become, without any conversation about it, the infrastructure the party was built on. And infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It just gets used, and then it gets forgotten the moment the lights come on and the guests arrive, because by then it's supposed to disappear into the walls, invisible and load-bearing at the same time. There was a particular Sunday, 4 weeks in, when I called my mother just to talk through the seating chart, and she picked up mid-conversation with someone else, phone clearly not on mute. And I heard her say to whoever was in the room with her, "It's Margaret. She's got some question about the party." Hold on. Some question about the party. Not my daughter. Not even my name used as anything other than a placeholder for a task. I sat with that phrase longer than I probably should have. I told myself, the way I told myself so many things that spring, that I was reading too much into it, to understand what happened at that dinner. You need to understand Vanessa. My sister is 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she has occupied a different category in our family than I have. Vanessa is beautiful in the effortless way that makes people assume she's also effortlessly kind, which she is not. She married well. Her husband Derek works in commercial real estate and talks about square footage the way other men talk about sports. She has 2 kids who are, by all accounts, lovely, and she posts about them constantly, always with captions that manage to center herself. Mom life is the best life. Blessed beyond measure. That sort of thing. Vanessa has never organized a family event in her life. Not one. She has, however, always been extraordinary at arriving to them, stepping into a room my labor had built and somehow becoming its focal point within minutes. It's a specific talent, and I don't say that sarcastically. It genuinely is a skill, the way some people can walk into a job interview and radiate competence they haven't yet demonstrated. Vanessa radiates hostess energy she has never once earned. Growing up, I used to think this was just how older sister dynamics worked. She got the room. I got the reading assignments. It was only in my late 20s, after years of therapy I paid for myself because our family didn't really believe in that I started to understand the shape of it more clearly. My mother needed a golden child and a workhorse, and she had cast us both in those roles before either of us was old enough to audition for something else. 3 days before the anniversary party, Vanessa texted the family group chat, "So excited to host you all Saturday! Can't wait to celebrate Mom and Dad." Host, I read that word 4 times. I looked at the invoice folder on my laptop, at the vendor confirmations, at the calligraphy I'd redone at midnight, and I told myself it was probably just careless phrasing. People say host loosely. It didn't necessarily mean anything. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second, because I sat with it for 3 days. It probably doesn't mean anything. That's the sentence people like me say right before we find out that it meant everything. The night of the anniversary, I arrived early, of course I did, to do the final walkthrough with the restaurant staff. I checked the flowers, straightened the place cards, confirmed the timing of the courses with the manager, a kind, harried man named Theo, who kept calling me the bride out of habit before catching himself and laughing. I didn't correct the warmth of the mistake. It felt, for about 4 minutes, like someone in that building understood whose event this actually was. Guests started arriving around 6:30. The room looked exactly the way I'd pictured it back in March. Sketching layouts on a legal pad during my lunch break, string lights catching the edge of the exposed brick, the ranunculus arrangements low enough on the tables that people could actually see each other over them, something I'd insisted on after visiting 3 florists who wanted to build centerpieces the size of shrubbery. The playlist I'd built drifted under the noise of arriving guests, low enough to be a mood and not a distraction. I stood near the entrance for a moment, just taking it in, feeling something loosen in my chest for the first time in 6 weeks. It looked right. It looked like the party my parents deserved. My father, Walter, hugged me tight at the door and said quietly, "Just for me. Your mother told me you did all this. Thank you, Maggie." It was the kind of moment I'd been waiting 6 weeks for, and I held onto it like a life raft, because I had no idea yet how much I was going to need it. Vanessa arrived at 7:20. Dinner service began. I had arranged with the restaurant for a specific choreography. The appetizer plates were to come out first to my parents' table. A small formal gesture Theo and I had discussed, a way of marking the moment before the room settled into general conversation. I stepped toward the table with the first plate, the one meant for my mother, wanting to be the one to set it in front of her. I don't know exactly why that detail mattered to me so much. Maybe because it was the one physical, visible thing I could do, in front of everyone. That said, I made this happen. My mother looked up at me, plate in my hands, and said, pleasantly the way you'd correct a waiter, "Oh, Margaret, put that down, sweetheart, you're not staff. Let Vanessa handle serving. She's been so wonderful about all this. 90 seconds. That's how long it took for the entire evening to reorganize itself around a lie. I want to describe what that felt like physically, because embarrassed doesn't cover it. There's a specific kind of heat that starts at your collarbone and climbs into your face when you're humiliated somewhere you can't leave. My hands didn't shake. I'm proud of that, actually. Looking back, but I remember feeling the exact weight of that plate, warm through the rim, and understanding with total clarity that if I set it down and walked away right now, I would be agreeing to a story. The story where Vanessa hosted and Margaret helped, and everyone's memory of this night would file itself accordingly, the way memories always do, favoring the person standing in the light instead of the one who built the stage. Vanessa reached for the plate, smiled at me. That particular smile, the one that had been doing me a favor by existing since we were children. "I've got it," she said. "Go relax." I did not, in fact, hand her the plate. Here is the thing about a lifetime of being underestimated. It teaches you patience you didn't ask for, and it teaches you precision you didn't know you'd need. I had spent 6 weeks building a room full of receipts. I just hadn't planned on using them that night. But standing there, holding a plate that wasn't mine to serve according to my own mother, something in me, very quietly, very calmly, finished a calculation it had apparently been running for 35 years. I didn't yell. I want to be honest with you, some version of me, somewhere deep down, wanted to. But yelling would have made me the story. Yelling would have handed Vanessa exactly what she needed, a scene she could later describe as Margaret having one of her moments. I had watched her do that to me before, at smaller stakes. Not this time. Instead, I set the plate down, in front of my mother, exactly where it belonged. And I said clearly, in a voice pitched for the whole table, not just her, "Of course. I just wanted to make sure the room turned out the way I planned it. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, all of it. I know how much you love ranunculus, Mom." I remembered. Small sentence. Enormous door. My mother's smile did something complicated. Vanessa's did too. Because everyone at that table, 30 people, half of them relatives who'd flown in, half of them my parents' oldest friends, had just heard, plainly, that the daughter currently being told to sit down was the one who'd built the entire evening. Not implied. Stated. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, who has never in her life missed a social subtext, said a little too brightly, "Margaret, this is gorgeous. Did you do all of this yourself, honey?" I could have deflected. 6 weeks earlier I would have. I would have said something like, "Oh, it was a team effort," and let the moment dissolve back into comfortable ambiguity. Because that's what I'd been trained to do. Smooth things over. Make myself smaller so the room could stay easy. But I looked at my mother's face, at the plate cooling on the table in front of her, at Vanessa's hand still half extended toward nothing, and I said simply, "I did." Every bit of it. The venue deposit, the flowers, the photographer, the room. I wanted tonight to be perfect for them. Theo, bless him, chose that exact moment to walk back in with the second course, and all because I'd given him my card for every vendor conversation over 6 weeks. Because he'd watched me handle every single logistical detail personally, he said, entirely without prompting, to the table at large, "Margaret's been an absolute pleasure to work with. Most organized client we've had all year." A restaurant manager, a neutral third party with no dog in this fight, had just corroborated everything without me having to ask him to. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and let the silence do the rest of the work. Vanessa recovered fast. She always does, pivoting into a story about how she'd helped coordinate some of the smaller details, which was true in the sense that she had, in fact, texted me a link to a florist I didn't use. But the frame had already shifted, and frames, once shifted, are hard to shift back. I watched 3 separate relatives find their way to me over the next hour, unprompted, to tell me how beautiful everything was, how thoughtful, how me it all felt. Not one of them said it to Vanessa. My mother pulled me aside near the dessert course, in the little hallway by the restrooms, her voice low. "You didn't need to make it a whole thing, Margaret," she said. "You embarrassed your sister." I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years without the automatic flinch of wanting her approval, and I said, "I didn't say anything that wasn't true. I think what actually happened is that the truth embarrassed her." "Those aren't the same thing, Mom." She didn't have a response to that. My mother has many gifts, but handling a version of me who won't apologize for accuracy has never been one of them. She stood there for a moment, mouth slightly open, like she was waiting for the version of Margaret who used to fill silences like this one with an apology, some soft walk back that would let her keep the story she preferred. That version of me didn't show up. I think that unsettled her more than anything I actually said. "I just don't understand why you had to say it in front of everyone," she tried again, quieter this time, the anger draining into something closer to genuine confusion. "Because everyone was already being told a version of tonight that wasn't true," I said. "I didn't correct anything that hadn't already been said out loud, Mom. I just added the part that was missing." She didn't have an answer for that either. She smoothed the front of her dress, glanced toward the dining room where the dessert course was being cleared, and said only, "We'll talk about this later," which is a sentence my mother has said to me at least a dozen times over the years and has never once followed through on. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for a follow-up conversation. I'd already said everything I needed to say, and I'd said it once, clearly, in front of the only audience that mattered. My father found me by the coat check as people were starting to leave. He didn't say much, he rarely does, but he squeezed my shoulder and said, "I always knew. I just didn't think you needed me to say it out loud." I told him I did, actually. I told him it would have meant something all those years to hear it said out loud even once, at any birthday, any holiday, any ordinary Tuesday when I'd shown up to fix something nobody else wanted to deal with. He nodded slowly, like a man filing away a lesson 40 years too late, and said he'd try to do better. I believe he might, actually. My father is quiet, but he isn't dishonest. And there's a difference. And it's a difference I've started to care about a lot more than I used to. Even Aunt Carol found me one more time before she left, pressing a hand to my arm at the coat check and saying, low enough that only I could hear it, "I've known your mother 42 years, Margaret." That's the first time I've ever seen her not have something to say. She laughed, a small, conspiratorial sound, and squeezed my arm once before disappearing into the night with my uncle. And I stood there for a second longer than I needed to, letting that land. Nobody threw a drink. Nobody stormed out. If you were a stranger watching from the next table, you might not have even clocked that anything significant had happened. That's the thing about this kind of revenge. It doesn't look like revenge from the outside. It looks like a woman calmly stating facts at her own family's dinner table. But inside our family, something recalibrated that night that hasn't fully unwound since. Vanessa and I haven't had a blowout fight about it. That's not really her style, or mine anymore. But the group chat is quieter now, and when family events come up, nobody assumes anymore that I'll simply absorb the labor and hand over the credit. 2 months later, when my cousin got engaged, my mother actually asked Vanessa to help with the shower planning. First time in memory. I don't know if that's growth or just my mother recalculating who owes her a favor. Possibly both. I've stopped needing it to be pure to count it as a win. As for me, I still love my family, complicated as that love is. But I don't set the table for people who tell me to sit down anymore. I still cook the meal. I still care. I just make sure now that everyone at the table knows exactly who bought the groceries. The moment Margaret sets the plate down and speaks, calmly, factually in front of the entire family, is the emotional peak of the story. Her mother's practiced composure cracks. Vanessa, caught mid-performance with no script for this version of events, has nothing to reach for. The restaurant manager's unprompted validation is the final nail, an outside, neutral voice confirming what the family tried to erase. No shouting, no dramatics, just the truth, placed on the table like the $90 plate that started it all. Margaret's story isn't really about a dinner party. It's about what happens when you stop performing gratitude for being used and start simply telling the truth out loud, in front of the people who'd rather you didn't. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is refuse to disappear, quietly. If Margaret's story hit close to home, if you've ever built something for your family only to watch someone else take the bow, let us know in the comments. What's the moment you finally stopped staying quiet? Smash that like button, subscribe for more stories like this one, and we'll see you in the next episode of Calm Drama Stories.